John Wang, welcome to the podcast, man. It's great to have you for our second chat, and again,
Yeah.
I'm so honored to have been a part of yours. Big Asian energy. I love it, man. I love it so much. Like, actually, I responded to your email at first because when they emailed me, Big Asian Energy team, I was just like, dude, that is, I love that. I love that. I'm obsessed with that that vibe. It's great marketing, and I'm curious to dive in. First of all, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm stoked to be here. Gabby, we had a previous chat on my show, so this just
Yeah.
feels like we're hanging out and grabbing another coffee because that first chat, it just flew by. Whew.
Yeah. It was very exciting, and honestly, it's like I don't really get to talk about that experience so much because it kinda gets, like, pushed to the side, and I think that that's the experience for a lot of Asian Americans or really anybody that's kinda first generation. Like, there's a whole struggle involved with being first gen, and it's not really recognized or talked about, and I'm curious to hear your experience with that, and also the book. Dude, I'm almost finished with your book, and it's a fantastic I have a lot of good commentary, for your book, actually. Yeah,
Oh, thank you so much. And
yeah.
just in the spirit of relentless, shameless self promotion, which is something I really believe in, because I think that as Asian Americans, we don't do enough of that. It's
Mm,
just like
yes.
having
Yeah.
I'm super excited because a couple of days ago, I found out that Amazon listed my book as being one of the best books of 2025 so
That's
far.
amazing. Wow.
I was blown away. And this is exactly what
Yeah.
I'm talking about. I never thought a book on Asian American or cultural experiences could get that kind of recognition. It just never crossed my mind. I always thought, I was going to put it out there, and if people recognize it and see it and are interested in it, great. And I got to say, this has been one of the most humbling um, experiences that I've ever had in my life. Really.
Wow. Wow. It's funny to hear you say that you could get such high recognition from something like Amazon and that being a humbling experience.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Because
Yeah.
it's a funny thing. I think the immediate experience, so we might also dive into the inner work of it.
Yeah.
The immediate experience that I had after seeing that, because it was the first thing, when you put out a book, the first 2 weeks, you're kind of in
Mm,
limbo. And nobody ever tells you this because you just think that, like, oh, like so and so is an author, they published a book, and you kind of have this vision that, like, oh, they know what they're doing. The truth is,
mm,
maybe most of them do. I didn't. My first
mhm.
book.
Yeah. Wow.
And for 2 weeks after, you're kind of living in limbo and uncertain about, is this book good? Like, I spent 2 years pouring blood, sweat, and tears into it. And you hope against hope that it will land for people.
Mm,
So it felt like a relief. People keep
mm,
asking me, what does it feel like now that a book is out? I'm like, I feel relieved. And I think this is the crux of what it feels like, is it felt like I finally got kind of like a good report card back,
mm, mm.
which shows you how deep that conditioning goes when we're so focused on like the external validation of how it is that we show up in the world and how hard it can be to even break that, even at this stage.
That is so deep and so beautiful that you're able to say that and share that. And I find that so funny, like to that comparison of getting a good report card to like getting that recognition. And
Mhm.
well deserved because I feel like I was able to relate to your book so much, and I feel like most Asian Americans and even non will be able to take valuable lessons from that. And like I really love also how you um one of the main themes of your book to really crack into it is like the difference between the cultural context that like a Asian American experiences versus not, and like what's considered um often in like American advice or what works in America or Western culture being like, can you connect with people and communicate? Can you show this leadership quality of like what's considered being a good leader is being this like extroverted, able to negotiate, able to have hard conversations is so foreign and can seem so disrespectful and like off base for like Asian Americans. And I know that's true for me. And it's so funny, like on your podcast, I talked about this a little bit about like seeing the like wait a second, like the social structure is weird, just kind of being first generation, noticing all these differences and finally being able to break out of it. It's kind of like a cheat code when you're able to learn that and like really be like, stand out in that way. Like I know for myself in job interviews, and sorry, I'm rambling off because I really do want to pass on the mic to you and hear more about your story and journey. But like I know for myself in job interviews, how important it is to just come up with like a good first impression, to be able to talk about your skills and your accomplishments in a way that's like actually sounds good, that could seem like bragging, but you're able to like sell it in a good way, and just being able to like negotiate on a price. And it's not just about like keeping your head down, doing the work and getting recognized, because that's really not what it is here. And I love how you're able to really call that out and write it so well in your book.
No.
I'd love to hear you talk more about that, and I'd love to hear your journey too in that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And, my journey was very much that was exactly how I felt growing up. And you nailed
Mm,
it. It is 100% a cheat code once you figure it out. Because really, I always thought that there was this concept of competence work, which is like the
mm,
thing that you're always taught when you're growing up. That's the most important. Like being smart, having those hard skills, learning those technical abilities, doing well on tests. And for a long time, I thought that was the blueprint for succeeding because that was always what was taught, because that was how
mm,
my immigrant parents, when I was young, grew up. And that's what they based things off of. They came from a culture that valued that so much. And so growing up in North America, I just thought, well, that makes sense. Exactly as you say. I was always taught like work hard, keep your head down, don't make
mm.
waves. And that was my blueprint when I was in high school. Literally, I recently was going through my old yearbook from elementary school. And I recently came across my picture and it was just like, I'm like, it's like, this is my little seventh grade picture of me. And underneath, biggest dream was get more A's. And I couldn't help but just think, oh my God. Like this poor kid at sixth or seventh grade, and all he could think of in life was, how do I get more A's? And I felt like that was
Wow.
my blueprint, right? Because like
Uh,
that was my blueprint. Even up to everything else I was doing was like, how do I work harder than everyone else until I hit burnout?
mm, mm,
And it wasn't until then that I started looking at the way that I was doing things. And I started looking at other people around me. And I realized, this is strange. A lot of the people that I thought, were so much more ahead of me, that I thought was more capable and more competent. The more I talked to them, the more I realized that many of them really weren't. They weren't harder working. They weren't, necessarily smarter. They weren't necessarily more capable, but they were really good at being present and talking about what it is that they're good at and
mm,
sharing that. And so I went, oh, okay, so that's self promotion, which I hated doing because I always
mm,
thought like self promotion just feels like so braggy and narcissistic, until I had a chat with a mentor. And a mentor
mm,
kind of showcased to me that it's not about sharing your wins as if you're bragging, it's sharing your process so that people can relate to you and know what to do with you. And that was
mm,
huge. And, my mentor kind of asked me a question, which is like, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody hears it, did it really fall? And it was like that classic
okay.
philosophical question.
Yeah.
And then it became, if you accomplish something, but nobody
Mm,
really saw you doing it and understanding what you did it, will they understand your value? And I think that was
mm.
where it sparked this journey of change for me.
That's turning some gears in my head. Like that is fascinating. That really landed with you and made some type of impact where you realized how how will people know what I can offer them and the value that I can provide if you don't really talk about it. And there's really a balance, because again, like if you brag, it does come across as bragging.
Mhm.
But the truth is like marketing. I know as a therapist, marketing is so important. Like really, when you talk about being a good therapist, it's honestly more about being able to market than being better, like more skilled. And obviously, like being skilled and having experience is good marketing, but it's like what ultimately I find gets people clients and gets their business going is like, are you able to really sell your therapy skills in the right way? And it's
Mhm.
like, yeah, like I know somebody that was charging $1,000 a session and they were booked. Like, and probably they only worked with like 5 clients a week, but like, they're booked. And they were able to do it. And it's crazy. It's because they were able to really market that idea very well, like what they were able to do.
Yeah.
And I guess, yeah, kind of bringing that back to you and understanding like how you were able to really write that into words, like express that idea, and the stuff that you really talk about in your book. You mentioned at the end, like towards the end, by the part two of Big Asian Communication. Um, I'm trying to remember the exact words, but you had and I'm not sure if you'll remember off the cuff right now, but like a type of formula for people about like presenting the problem and giving stories about how you've been able to help people.
Yes, absolutely. I really love, there's a couple of different frameworks that I teach, but there's there's one that I talk about. I'm not sure if this is what you're referring to, but it's called part. It's kind of like
Mm,
sharing your part of the work. And
mm,
part basically breaks down into 4 steps because it's always hard. We think that it's about constantly bragging about what we've done and talking about that. But two things. One, the real work is in understanding what our own self-judgment is,
mm,
because a lot of time the biggest struggle we run into when we're sharing isn't like the difference between sharing and bragging isn't actually in what we say, but how we say it and the energy
mhm,
that we say it. So if I'm trying to, come out and talk to somebody and I'm like flexing by name dropping and talking about, oh, I did this and I booked this and oh yeah, I charge this amount of money, people can kind of sense that you're coming from a place of scarcity. You're coming from a place of trying to show off yourself from a egoic place. But if you're coming and sharing from a place where you're not seeking for validation, the
mm,
sharing and the storytelling you have is really coming from a place of teaching. And
mm,
this is where it is that bragging versus sharing really differs, because bragging doesn't provide value. Bragging is
mm,
actually trying to put the other person down by saying, look at how
mm,
great I am.
mhm,
Whereas sharing provides value because you're actually sharing something you learn in the process. So
mm,
what part stands for starts from P, which is the problem. So if you're this could be done in a conversation, it could be done on a video if you're, a content creator, it could be done during an interview, it could be done in the elevator, or even just a walk to somebody's car. And it's just saying, "Hey, look, recently I ran into this problem that I
mhm,
wasn't, sure how to deal with. And then this is the action that I took, which is the second thing, which is A. A stands for action. So the action that I took was, I didn't really know how to deal with this particular, let's say it's a difficult client that I ran into. I was really struggling to really get through to that client. And then I took some time and I really looked at what was underneath the client's struggles. And I
mm,
realized that they weren't being heard in the way that I really wanted them to feel. And then that goes to the R, which is what was it that you did that changed it and the result that it came with. So the action that you did was what you did. The result
mhm,
that came from it is what the outcome was. This is the part that most people feel least comfortable sharing because they think it's bragging, because the result is actually how you solve the problem. So this is
mhm,
where the most important part is T, which stands for what was your takeaway? What is it that you're sharing as an advice that other people can now take as a lesson or learned that they can now better their lives with? So this is where
mm.
what I'm saying is that it's all about sharing what the takeaway was so that other people get value from it. And in the process, you also get to showcase what your journey looks like.
That's brilliant, John. How did you find all of these different tips for yourself, like these different techniques that are so powerful? And I feel like obviously you struck a nerve, um, and that's why I think you're getting the recognition that you rightfully deserve. And I'm curious to hear like the story and your personal journey with it. Like, how did you learn these things? What was the process? What was the story behind the book?
Oh, lots and lots and lots of failures.
Mm,
Lots and lots
yeah.
of mistakes. I mean, I've been an entrepreneur for, 15 years. I've been doing a lot of coaching. I work with people from a wide variety of backgrounds, anything from like chefs to firefighters to people in Fortune 500 companies. A lot of them come from tech and consulting
Mm,
and such. And I personally, in my own process of building the business, in my own process of starting, I essentially wanted to build a school at the time. And I built a
mm,
thing called Mastery Academy, and we started getting more and more students. And when you're building a business, much like being a therapist or counselor, you learn that if you don't know how to talk about the problems you solve, nobody is going to give you the time of day, because the only thing people really care about is what's in it for me.
mm,
And I'm not saying that as a negative thing, like I'm putting anyone down, but people are busy. People
Right.
all they really care about is how do I integrate our conversation in a way that betters my life? And that could be emotional, that could be storytelling, or it could be more personal. So I had over the years been always obsessed with the belief that I am not always the smartest person in the room. I am not always the most charismatic, confident, charming, whatever it is. But I believe that if somebody else did something and I can crack that code, that I could do the same thing. It's kind of
Mm,
like if I see somebody else who cooked a meal, I'm not saying that I could replicate a Michelin star chef, but I could
mhm.
probably get 90% of the way there.
How did you get that confidence?
I think I appreciate you calling that confidence. I think really it was just this relentlessness and this desire to prove my parents wrong.
Yeah.
My parents were big on education.
Mm,
They were traditional Asian parents, which is to say, they were really focused on academics and they were really focused on like, I want you to go and be a doctor, a lawyer, engineer, etc. Only problem was I sucked at math, so I wasn't going to be an engineer because I shouldn't be the person building bridges. I sucked at biology, and I cringe at the sight of blood, so I definitely shouldn't be a
mm.
doctor because people will die. So I thought I'll go be a lawyer.
Oh, man.
Um,
Mm,
and then when I started my pursuit of going to law school, I did the LSATs. I applied. Everything was great. I was just about to start when I went and interned for a lawyer. And in the 2 weeks that I worked there, they had me do document review. And when I was going
mm.
through a document review, I don't know if anyone ever done something like this before, but it's literally just reading through thousands of pages of like total
God.
gibberish and trying to find mistakes. And it's soul sucking.
Dude, oh,
So
no.
I said to myself, look, this is not going to be my path. And I
Mm,
don't know what else to do. So I talked to my parents and I said, hey, look, mom and dad, this isn't this. I don't know what to do. Right. Like you gave me 3 paths to go through. None of them fit me. I'm just not cut out for this. But I want to do something. I really believe in helping people. I really believe in the inner work and the self-development work. I really want to go and start something. And my mom was a little bit skeptical in some ways. She was just kind of like, I don't know what you're talking about, but yeah, if you think you can do it, you can give it a shot. If not, you're going to come back and you're going to pick a path that we tell you to pick.
mm,
Um,
mhm. How long did they give you?
and- oh, we extended that deadline so many times. I think it started off as like, we'll give you a year. And then I'm like, okay. And I got kind of like a couple of clients at the time into the
Mm,
business. They were students and we started working with them. And, and then we kind of said, okay, we have a proof of concept now. We can keep going. But in the back of my mind, it was just, I can't go back to that law firm. I can't go back to a life where all I'm doing is reading documents day in and day out and trying to find more billable hours. This is going to crush my soul.
right.
So that was where it is that like I learned everything out of necessity. I learned everything because I needed to, because it was either that or I was going to sit in an office, be a lawyer, and feel like I'm dying inside.
Mhm. Dude, I mean, I'm with you there. That's so soul crushing, and I'm sure that lit the fire under you. And meaning, just to be clear, you're how old at this time, and what's the business you start? Like this coaching, trying to build this academy for
Yeah.
entrepreneurship. Like, what was the idea?
So I was
Uh,
in my early 20s. Uh,
mhm,
so I really wanted to learn more about communication as well as the inner work. So the business is called Mastery Academy, and it has a couple of components. We taught communication, we worked with students, it was coaching, we had classes, we had programs, that kind of stuff. But where it really started from was I was 19 years old. I went with a friend to a conference where there were all these like personal development. It was all those personal development conferences where you have like all
mhm,
these speakers, like motivational speakers, Tony Robbins types. And so I went because I was invited and my friend had an extra free ticket. I had no money. So I
mm,
was crashing in his bathroom, like literally in his bathtub was where I was sleeping. And went to the conference, and I got to see all these various speakers. And there was something about it that really caught my interest with one
Mm,
particular speaker. And because all the other speakers are coming out and they were doing these rah like motivational speeches, but there's this one guy who came up, and he was so focused on the mindset and the psychology behind the way that we showed up that it really caught my
mm.
interest.
Any
So
would
I
it be
had
any yeah,
was
any
that?
insight? By the way, I just wanna call out how funny it is that you were sleeping in your friend's bath, like, in his bathtub to go to this event. That's
Oh,
hilarious.
100%. Yeah, because I
Yeah,
had no money, right? I was a student. I was a broke
right.
student. I was in Montreal, and like there was this event. I think it was in Chicago. So we're like, oh, we'll drive down there, and I was like, great, I'll like
Yeah.
drive with you. I couldn't afford a hotel room, so I was like, if I can, I'll like just crash in your bathtub. I won't disturb you. But yeah, so I came across this guy, and I was like, wow, the way that he spoke about this was so fascinating. And he was talking about essentially that when you're dealing with people, we tend to commoditize or transactionalize every interaction we have. We tend to see people from the perspective of what can they do for me, and what is it
Mm,
that I'm trying to get out of that. But the way
mhm,
he approached it was completely different. He was making the suggestion of like the way that we relate to other people at a soul level, as in
mhm,
at a human level first, is the most important rather than seeing what it is that we want to get out of them. And it's such a simple idea, but it's like the meta of every conversation is always built on, am I here because somebody wants something from me, or because I'm building a real bond? And that
mm,
what relatively simple idea that every single person you meet and talk to is somebody who has, this is an actual quote. I can't remember who is from, but every person you speak to is someone who has lost something, loved something, felt the pain of something, the hurt of something. And in this exact moment is really just trying to do the best that they can. And when I had that revised mindset around my interaction with people, everything changed. Because every interaction I get to now, I'm just trying to get to the person who's at the core of that performance, core of what it is that they're trying to put out. So anyway, in
yeah.
the story, I loved this guy, what he was talking about. So I went to find him out in the middle of like the event during lunchtime, and I basically I saw him sitting at a table, and he was just having lunch. And I talked to the waiter, and I was like, "Hey, I like to pay for that guy's lunch." And the waiter's like, "Sure," and I paid for his lunch. Mind you, I was really freaking out
And
because I had like $60-$70 in my account. I was like, I'm not sure that's gonna be enough, but I'm hoping to put it on my credit card. And he invited me, and he was just like, oh, because he found out that I paid for him. He's like, he invited me. So I sat down with him, and I had this wild idea, and I said, look, I love what you were talking about. I want to learn more about this, and I think that I could help you. I have
wow.
no idea how to help him. He's a 50-year-old guy who has been doing this professionally his entire life. I'm a 19-year-old college kid who has no experience, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I'm like, I want to offer value. So I
Wow.
said, give me until tomorrow morning. I'll come back. I'm going to pitch you on the idea of us working together as business partners. And you'll be the speaker, you'll be the talent. I'm going to set up your events and do all that for you. And then I proceed to spend the entire night at the business center of the hotel, Googling how to write a business plan. And stayed up, wrote a business plan, printed it out. There's a part of me that still finds it so funny, but like the next morning, I showed up at breakfast, and I just dropped this like 15-page business plan in front of him, and was like, "Here, I put this together this morning," which is still kind of true. Technically, 1 a.m. is still morning, and he was
Yeah.
so impressed that he was like, "Yeah, let's start a business together."
Are
So
you serious?
that was my first business.
I I'm, like, blown away. My mind is absolutely blown right now. This is
and,
such a
and,
fascinating story. I'm
and
just
yeah,
wow.
he was yeah.
How did you have the guts to do that?
Um, I think that there's a number of different experiences that I've had over the years that have taught me how to fail.
Mm.
I think we learn and obsess about how to succeed too much. We don't learn and obsess about how to fail. And
I'd love to hear more about this.
yeah, so what I mean by how to fail is that really, if you were given full permission to make every mistake without having ever to worry about consequences, how successful do you think you'll become? And I think the answer for most of us would be actually immensely. Because
Mm,
if there's no consequence, there's no social consequences. We never had to worry about embarrassment. We will shoot our shot every single day, right? Like if we could just keep going out there, keep going out there, keep going out there, we'll eventually hit what it is that we need to do. It doesn't matter what
mm,
field you're in. It's almost a guarantee.
mm.
And every single year I take on personal challenges. I did a 1 year of radical honesty, which is like you can't tell a lie for a whole year. I did a year where I was preparing for my death. I did all of these kind of experiments.
Oh, wow.
And that year I had a rule, and that rule was if something scared me and there was no real physical consequences, like it wasn't going to harm anyone, it wasn't going to, cause me major struggles or anything like that, that the more scared of it, the more I had to go do it.
Okay,
And
wow. Alright, so, where did this take you?
yeah, and a lot of that was just like, okay, I have this because I was very shy when I was a kid. I had a
Mm,
lot of social anxiety. I was like the most awkward kid ever. It
mhm,
wasn't until I started getting into high school that I started reading more books about communication and all these things that I started showing up more. And so during this time, I was like, okay, what is the best way for me to overcome my social anxiety? Well, is to confront it, right? I think the term is exposure therapy.
right,
So for every single weekend, I would go out into the streets of downtown Vancouver and I would confront my social anxiety by constantly going up to people and starting small conversations.
mhm.
And in the beginning, it was literally just like, hi, it's the weather. It's nice, right? And people looking at me kind of like, yes, like what is this? And then later on, yeah, I started upgrading the levels and I started being okay, now I can start a conversation now without stuttering every single word. Let me tell a joke.
Mm,
Now I can actually go and ask them questions. So literally for months I would go and in like randomly approach people, so long as it looks like they would have minded and that they're open to it. And of course, if they felt like they were a little bit closed off, I would leave. But I would just approach people and start conversations. And I found that most part, people really welcomed it. And it helped me get over this fear of how will people see me? How will people view me and will they like me? Because I just started realizing that people are people. So that was
mm.
that was the one experiment that I did that year that really, I wouldn't say gave me courage or confidence, but it removed a lot of the fears that I had about how I was going to get seen.
That is brilliant. I'm so curious if you recommend this experiment or, like, also, I feel like that's a cool case scenario, but, like, I feel like for some people, it might take them, "Okay, I need to do skydiving. I need to do a crazy amount of psychedelics," or, like, I need to, um, like, just
Yeah.
really scary things, like, yeah,
Well, you know what
climb
is
a
I
mountain.
always believe in is that baby steps. Um,
Mhm.
For me, I mean, I could go on for a long time because that was a whole year, and we did a lot. I did a lot
Yeah,
of those things. It
I'm like
started getting wilder and wilder. Like I started putting
I
signs on my shirt. I started wearing funny hats. I started really
wow.
random conversations. Like the challenge just started getting more and more. It became like I had to go to a bus stop and ask if everyone would be okay if I sang a song in front of them. Like it got really
Oh my
wild.
gosh. Dude, that's what I'm saying, that's really what I wanna hear, like, and what you learned from that. Yeah, that is such a bizarre experience. Imagine going into a bus like, "Hey, excuse me, everyone, can I sing a song for you all?" And then imagine if
Yeah.
it's horrible too, like, you just gotta do it.
Oh, yeah, and it was horrible because 'cause I'm a terrible
Yeah.
singer, but everyone found it was so funny. Because I would go up and be
Yeah.
like, "Hi, everyone, I am so sorry to interrupt everyone's time. I will be out of your hair in about 30 seconds, but my name is John. I'm trying to overcome my social anxiety. Is it okay if I sing a quick song with you?" And they're all like, "Sure, that sounds hilarious." And
Yeah.
I would sing, like, "Happy Birthday" because that's the only song I knew how to sing.
Wow.
And then at the end of it, they would laugh and I would laugh and I'll be like, "Oh, that wasn't so hard." And then, and then people ask me and then you start conversations. But let me tell you, when I first started, I couldn't even make eye contact.
Mm,
So when do I recommend this? I'll say, yeah, but start where you're at.
mhm,
So one
mhm,
simple exercise that I actually have people do, especially if they feel that lack of confidence, is I'll just say, just start with eye contact, or just
Yeah.
start with this like one of the exercises I have in my book is it's called like the rock star walk. And it's called the Rockstar Walk is basically this, which is like find a busy street in your city on a day that, you know that it's not going to be like crowded or anything like that. And then imagine that you're walking on a set of like train rails so that you can only walk straight. So
Mhm.
you can only walk directly straight in front of you, but you can slow down, you can stop, or if let's say you come across somebody who, has some kind of mobility issues, or the old person or in a wheelchair, of course, then yeah, by all means, get out of their way. But then you have to then get out of their way, let them pass, and then go back on your rails because you can't turn. And
Mm.
so imagine that in the beginning, as I'm walking down the street and I'm going through this, you want to walk with your chest up, with your eyes, against the horizon without looking at anyone necessarily, but just continuously walking forward. And you'll notice that your body at first wants to move out of the way for people. And that was something I really experienced. I didn't notice this, but I was like constantly trying to dodge out of people. And I had to calm myself back down and stay in the same place or slow down. And that was when I started realizing the more that you are intentional in walking forward, the more people will part ways for you. And it
Mm.
wasn't like this thing where like they're like, "Oh, what a jackass, he's blocking the way." Like people don't even think about it. They naturally just go. But it is the energy in which you walk with. See,
Mm.
when you walk small, people see you as small. And when you're dodging other people, people think that you're going to dodge for them. But
Mm.
when you walk with confidence and when you walk with that assertiveness, people will slow down and they will either give you right away or, and this is something that would happen, I would come across people who they themselves are confident. And this little like dance would happen, or like this little like game of chicken would take place.
Right.
But nobody really is conscious of this because if they feel like they got that, like, I think the term now is like main character energy. A lot of
Mm.
times they just won't even notice and they will just keep walking forward and almost to the point that they'll bump into you. And this is where it
Fascinating.
is that you kind of have to slow down. And I would just slow down. If I see that they're charging straight at me again, we're not like making eye contact. They just don't see anyone else. And I would slow down. And there's almost a surprise that they'll experience where they're like, "Why are you not getting out of my way? Don't you know who I am?"
Mm.
And in that moment, there's like this kind of thing where like I will slow down and almost come to a stop, and then they'll then go like, "Oh," and then they'll go around. But after doing that exercise a few times, my confidence skyrocketed.
That's
And
bizarre, man.
I can't
Yeah.
tell you why precisely. I think beyond
Mm.
just the fact that what I was doing was I was reclaiming my space.
Mhm.
I was
Mm.
reclaiming that I don't have to be the person to get out of other people's way. Now, again, if they're sick, if they're older, if they look like they have mobility issues, I'll always get out of people's way. But again, it is about letting my nervous system get used to that level of challenge and exposure. And that's how I built it from that point on.
John, honestly, my mind is so blown, and I'm curious to know how did you get this kind of thing in your head to do like take on these yearly challenges? And you're talking about. I'm not sure if this Rockstar Walk was like a 1 year thing, or you were just really like experimenting with it for a while. But it's like it sounds like with each of these experiments, you've had these massive insights and changes, and you've also mentioned you prepared for your death for a year. And that sounds interesting. I'd really, if you wouldn't mind sharing about that
Yeah.
experience as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that happened after a friend of mine passed away. And
Mm.
he was really young. He was in his 20s. And we are, we were friends. We knew each other. In fact, we were talking about doing something like, "Oh, let's go camping one day." And then over the course of a few weeks, basically, he sent us a message and he said, "Hey, listen, I recently found out that I have cancer.
Mm.
And the doctors are only going to give me, a few months to live." And then 2 weeks later, he passed away. Um, it was just one of those things. It was my first real experience with death. And I think it
Right.
shook me in a way that I never realized because I was like, "Oh, wow." Like to me, when you're in your 20s, you just assume you're going to live forever. And
Right.
it really shook me. And I remember thinking, "Oh my gosh, like if I died, what will I think? What will I have experienced in my life that makes me proud?" And I remember sitting down, I went, "Okay, what will I want to do before I die? If I had a week left to live, what would I do?" And I started writing down this list on a piece of paper, and it was like, go skydiving, It was like, go eat at this restaurant, call my parents and all these kind of things. So over the course of that week, I went and I did it. And it was one of those things where you're like, I did it. And I was like, oh my gosh, why didn't I do this earlier?
Mm.
And then I thought about it and I went, well, what happens if I give myself a month left to live? What would I do if I only had 1 month left to live? And I started writing down more things. And it's interesting because when you give yourself a month, there's a lot more time and space. So that list looks different. Now that list is like, call up somebody that you haven't finished, a thought with. Let's say like, for me, it was who have I not apologized to? Or who have I not said thank you to that I would feel like would be a loss if I never got that chance?
So-
And that took a month. And at the end of that month, and I went, this has been already up at that point, one of the most life defining experiences I've ever had. And
Wow.
what would happen if I set it to a year? And what would those things be? And that included things like, well, I've never been to Paris, which I've always wanted to go to. I've never traveled here. I've never had this experience. I never painted a painting. I never made food. I've always loved cheesecakes, and I'm like, I'm gonna make a cheesecake. And it was a terrible cheesecake. It was a messy cheesecake. Absolute mess of a cheesecake, but I made a cheesecake. And so I had a little clock that was on my computer at the time, and it was a countdown clock that tells me how many days, days, hours, minutes, seconds left until I die. And that completely reshaped my own prioritization, because when you realize that your life is finite, all the things that don't matter, all the people that don't matter, they just start to fade away. So that was one of those things that like completely reshaped how I view life, basically.
What a powerful, like, game changing experience. Like, I feel like that must somehow mess with your neurology in some way to like that mindset and the willingness to be able to sit with that idea of like time is limited, and
Oh yeah.
like really, yeah. What do you think set you apart? Like, why do you think you're able to do this experiment? Like, I think I'm even trying to think about me myself doing it, and there's like a fear of doing that, and I feel like I probably won't, Um,
So I'm curious to
yeah,
hear it. Like,
yeah.
what is the uncertainty? What is the fear? Why wouldn't you do something like that?
Yeah, no, it's a good
Not
question.
that
I
you
mean,
have
I
to.
feel
I'm
like
curious what's coming
no,
up.
no, no. It's a very valid question. To me, I think like the immediate thing that comes up is like if I literally only had a year left to live, like if the doctor gave me a sentence, I really do think I would prioritize like travel and seeing
Mm.
things that I wanted to do and having these experiences. And many of them I probably should do. Um, but a lot of it is just like I don't do it because like the money is not exactly there and I'm trying to be smart with it, having like a family or whatever and like trying to be responsible. So it's like how long I'm conflicted now, man. I'm really conflicted. I'm like, well, like, is it really worth doing the saving, or is it like better spent actually having these experiences? They're, I don't know. It's something I'm definitely gonna have to mull over.
Well, I mean, what I might look at, and if I were in your shoes, would be I would still sit down and try the exercise of just writing it down, because I
Mm,
think that's really where it starts from. Because what the experiment is really about is forcing you to confront what is actually important. Now,
mhm,
you're a dad, you have a family to take care of, you have real responsibilities. I was a 20 something year old kid, right? Like, so there is, of course, a difference to that, and you're being
right.
responsible. But the reason I'll suggest still writing it down is because by writing it down, you still get to see. And then you
Yeah.
start to ask yourself questions like, well, sure, can I still prioritize this sometime? Maybe not in this year, but can I make
Mhm,
this a thing I really want to do over the next couple of years? Can I at least schedule it? Can I put
right.
money aside from it? Right? Like there's
But
that level, I
yeah.
think, and it resets. Because what I really learned, and this comes back down to a lot
Mm,
of the things we are talking about on our last chat, was I never really realized how much of my life I was living for other people.
mm,
I talk about this in the final chapter of the book, which is called, like being the author of your own story, because I'm a really big believer now in self authorship. As in, imagine that every single page is a day in your life, and every major part of your life is a different chapter. I never thought about this, but I look back and I realize how much of my life was written by my parents, by my
mm,
teachers, by the people I was dating, by the people that I was working for or working with, because I was trying to live the life that they would expect from me. And it was filled with assumptions and unchecked stories and expectations. And I never realized how much of that I was carrying in me, where I would feel shame or guilt for not doing more of something that, well, perhaps I never even stopped to ask, do I really want to do this?
Mm.
And exercises that, like the ones we talked about, like, like the 1 year of death preparation exercise, really is about asking, what is really more important to me? Like, what is my core values? What is it that I want to leave behind? And that realigns everything else we get to do. So I think that's really the core of it, that you don't have to actually prepare for your death. As a matter of fact, it might not be something for you at all. But at least writing it down, you might start to see, wait a second, if I take a look at how much time I'm spending each week doing all these things, how many of these things am I truly doing for me? And how many of these things am I doing because of other people's expectations?
John, this is giving me chills. I'm going to do this exercise of writing it down at the very least. And you're so right about how like we need to at least confront like what do you actually want versus what is a story that you're just living out of based on like family or society or who knows where else. Um, a lot of quote unquote like our hopes and dreams have come from. Is that actually from us at all? Right? Um,
Absolutely. And that
yeah.
could be, oh, I've always wanted to get this degree. Why?
Mm,
I've always wanted, felt like I should do this or have this house or buy this car. So often, I mean, one of the first questions I work with my clients is just figuring out what they want.
mhm.
And then one of my favorite things to do is kind of breaking it down to seeing why they want that and what they think that they'll get out of it.
Yeah.
And you'd be shocked by how many times I'll have people who kind of halfway through realize, oh, wait a second, actually, that wouldn't be a win at all. Like, if I
Mm,
actually got that job, that sounds exhausting. No, what I really
mm,
wanna do is go and spend more time with my family. Or what I really wanna do is go and, like, pursue, this artistry that I've always wanted to go into. I've always wanted to try this and do this and do this. And I said, "Well, when are you gonna do it? Like, when you
mm.
retire, when you're 70? Like, is that when you'll finally start traveling? Does that make sense for you?"
Right.
And I mean, think about how many people are on their deathbed looking at their lives, wondering what they could have done instead.
Yeah. I really wanna give a moment to even, like, sit with that, like, let that sink in. And I know that's, like, a heavy, heavy thought, but so powerful,
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, we're only given one life. I
right?
mean, what are we doing with it? It's a tough question to answer because we have so many things that we're supposed to juggle as humans. I think being a human is one of the hardest things you can do. Like, it's so
Yeah,
much more complex.
right.
But I think that the core of it is also such a gift that we get to be here. And if we actually calculated how much time we lose, or I wouldn't use the word waste, but that we lose or leave on the table because we haven't really calibrated our value system to the compass of our lives, I think this is where the regret really comes from.
Yeah, and that's so powerful. And I think a lot of it, like, why we're okay with it or almost like a sleep to it on the day to day, aside from the fact that, like, our society is just built for us not to think about that too much,
Mhm.
um, it's also just like do we really realize that we're even alive and how precious that is? Like, I feel like we take it for granted, right? Like we're just here, like, all right, whatever. But it's the biggest, bloodiest miracle. It's like, how the heck are we here? Like, like
Yeah.
how is this? How are you a conscious being um, with such immense capable understanding and ability to experience? Just here, right now, able to connect, like through a device. Like we're literally communicating. This is so bizarre, you know?
Yeah. We're
Yeah.
talking to each other across like hundreds of miles. Like, we're across a
Yeah.
continent. Here we
Right.
are
And
having this
it's yeah.
conversation. I
That's
I
so
have a big
insane.
rule, which
Yeah.
is I would not do anything that makes me feel like I'm diminishing energetically. Right. I think that we kind of have a check
Mhm.
in with ourselves. How alive do we feel, right? In the moment to moment. And even if you're listening to this, wherever you are in a car, walking, I challenge you to take a moment and just check in with your body on a scale of 1 to 10. How alive do you feel? If a 10 is
Mm.
like a peak experience, like I feel so alive, I'm here, I'm so passionate, I'm so excited to do all these things. And 0 is basically like, I am just a walking corpse. Like, where do you put yourself?
Mm,
And I think for most people, somewhere between, I'm going to guess, about a 4 to a 7, right? Probably, or maybe a 5 to a 7. And I'm a really big believer that, if at any point you're doing something that makes you feel 2 points lower, so if you're usually a 7 and that thing that you're supposed to do is doing a 5, you should take a look at it and ask,
mm,
why am I spending this time? Is it truly going to expand my life? And most of the time, I think the shoulds that we carry, we think that it's going to, make this massive change, but there's probably a better way to get about it. And I just don't do those things anymore if I can avoid it. Or I
yeah,
try everything I could do to avoid that, Like this conversation is a +2 for me.
yeah.
100%.
Oh, well.
It elevates my day right away just by being here.
I love that. Thank you, John. I'm honored to be a part of that.
Well, I'm the one enjoying it, so the
Look,
thanks,
can I
gratitude is all mine.
oh, yeah. Of course, I mean, I'm enjoying it too, man. John, you have a very infectious positive energy, so I'm glad we're
Oh,
connecting. But can I share an anecdote with you, by the way?
yeah.
So this is so funny. It used to be so draining with me to I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this experience, but, like, oftentimes with my mom, like, she'll call me on the phone and she'll tell me like a weird story that I just really don't care about. I don't really want to hear. Like this is a classic example. And I'm telling you, somehow the same story finds its way like to just be shared with me again, like every couple months, whatever. You know what I mean? So this is just an example of the story. It's a little bit dark, but this is literally a type of story my mom will tell me. She'll call me, she'll be like, Gabi, this lady, she was cheating on her husband with this man and she tried to break up with him, and then he went and he murdered her. He murdered her, like yeah, right? Like like a crazy story, right? Um, and
Oh my
I'm
god,
just like,
that's so dark. I don't know why I'm laughing.
dude, it's so
Yeah,
dark, it's so
great.
dark. But dude,
Love
I'm
the
telling you,
anime. Yep,
my mom just has like an arsenal of these stories of just like somebody was wrong place, wrong time, they get murdered. You know what I mean?
$100%.
Like yeah, like nonstop. Um, anyway, so basically things like that and a bunch of other things, they used to frustrate me so much. I'm just like, okay, like whatever, mom, I don't care, whatever. But I learned to really past few years, I really learned to like joke with it, like really take it and like bring it to the next level. Like here's another example. Honestly, my mom, I went to Texas to visit a friend, and like my mom, she calls me up, and I went. It was just me and my friend. She calls me up and she's like, "Gabi, what's going on? Why you leave your wife behind? Like, are you crazy? Like, why would you do that?" And obviously, like I talked about it with my wife. We were cool with it, and like it was working out. And I was just like, okay, Mom, I'll tell you what's happening, but you can't tell anybody. I signed an NDA. Do you know our my baby, Sari? She's the most beautiful baby ever. You know this. And she's like, yeah, of
Yeah.
course. She's the most beautiful. so, so I said, my friend in Texas here, he has an ex-girlfriend. Turns out she was a lesbian and she's married now to her friend. And she really wanted to have a baby, but she's still friends with my friend. So my friend showed her a picture of of my baby, and she said, "Oh my god, this baby's the cutest baby I've ever seen. I really want to have this baby." And so she flew me out here to be a sperm donor. And she's like, "Oh my god." But basically this whole thing, it's a crazy story, right? But this whole thing was a callback to my mom who was saying that like she wanted to she like at a certain point she had a friend that really wanted to have a child, and she was suggesting like, why don't you take my husband's sperm to like have a child? And it didn't end up happening, but like I was like, mom, you inspired me for this story. Like that's what inspired me. You know what I mean?
I
But like
love it. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
it's
How does she
dude,
react to that?
oh my god, it's so funny because I think she knows that I'm joking, right? But like she gets a kick out of it too. She loves it, and
Yeah.
like um she'll like play along. And this is a classic example of, bro, these types of conversations used to bring my energy levels like 5 points down.
Mm,
Now I
yeah.
I have so much fun with it. And like just to bring it around full circle with what I was telling you about, like the joke that she was saying. Not the joke, the morbid stories that she like just has like an arsenal of. I was just by her on Friday night and we were talking, and she's trying to tell me a joke. She's like, okay, Gabi, this is a joke. A lady, she was having an affair with her husband, and her husband comes and she says, "Oh, quick, hide in the closet." To the the guy she's having an affair with. And then the husband comes back, and sorry, I'm just gonna quit the voice for now, but I have a whole bit with my mom. I tried
No, no, no,
stand-up
keep
comedy
going. I
once, and
love this. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's pretty good. Um, so the husband comes back and he's like, "Oh, honey, I have this joke. I have to tell you this joke." And he says the joke, and he hears the laughter in the closet. And he's like, "What the heck?" So the wife thinks, "Oh my god, he's gonna murder him right now." Goes to the closet, opens the door, and he's like, "Oh, thank God you're here. I want to play chess with you." Like what? And basically, they have like a fun time, and they're just like friends. So, so I
Oh
tell
my.
her, yeah, right, like that, and this is like it's a joke. So I tell her, I'm like, "Mom, cheating is no joke. I know this one person who she was having an affair with her husband, and then she tried to break up with the person she was having an affair with, and he murdered her." I basically like took her exact story and just like flipped it.
And then flip it back to
I flipped it back.
her.
Dude, this is what I do. I literally do that
So
now,
good.
and it brings me so much joy to just like have this kind of like fun in this way.
I
Yeah,
love
sorry,
it.
long ramble, but I thought you might appreciate that
No, no,
actually.
no. I thank you for sharing that.
Right.
It's such a beautiful story. This is, and just to kind of reflect back, because this is such a beautiful demonstration. I think, we have Asian parents who are both of us. We have, yours is Central Asian parents, and there's a lot of similarities. I feel like between family dynamic styles,
Yeah.
and growing up, I had to learn how to communicate with my parents, and we don't really
Mm,
think about that very often because we're just like, oh yeah, I know how to speak, and we communicate. But the truth is that the real communication that happens isn't what is said; it's in the what's called a meta. So imagine that you have an iceberg, right? At the very top of the iceberg, that's the part that's above the water. That's the conversation that we think we're having. That's the words that are being spoken. But then underneath that, there is the what is unspoken, and that's the intention. And the intention could be unaware or aware
mm,
because it's just something that's the intention that we're trying to set. And underneath it is the need, right? Everything we say to one another, and I mean, you as a therapist, you encounter this every day, right? Like everything that we communicate is there's always a need behind it. And when my parents, because my mom also tells me stories like that, she loves sending me stories like that. And every single time now that when she just shares these kind of horror stories, I'm always like, thank you so much for caring about me. That
uh,
behind that story is, I don't want you to die. So you need to hear the
right.
story of warning so you don't die.
Yeah.
And I take the intention now and I'm like, great, thank you so much for worrying about me. And I, I'm probably not going to encounter that very often. So
Dude, I'm telling you though, yeah. If you could have fun with it, like joke with it,
have fun with it.
it's so satisfying.
Yeah.
Like I'll happens to be like I'll have fun with telling my mom the same story, and then she'll even tell me like, "Where'd you hear that story?" You
Oh,
know?
so good.
It's so fun.
So good.
Yeah. Um, yeah, man. Oh, I really do wanna hear more about that story with that guy, the 50-year-old guy that, like, you started that first business with, and how
Yep.
that went.
So okay. So the reason I'm pausing behind it is because it was my first ever business,
Mhm.
and it was also the first ever time I learned how not to run a business.
Mm,
Like I said, one thing I learned really early on was how to fail, and
mm,
not be affected by it. And really, I think that's the more important skill. And so basically, what happened was we started the business. I was organizing events. I was setting them up. We would, where he would go around and he would lead these seminars and he would do, teaching and taught and spoke at. We did a number of cities. It was really good. And then out of nowhere one day, he was just, at this point, our work has developed a little bit further. There's now a little bit more reputation and everything like that. And he just basically said, listen, I think I'm going to find someone else or just work without it. And he essentially cut me out.
mm. Oh,
And for
man.
a while, I was really hurt because I was young. I didn't know how to sign proper contracts. I didn't have a proper contract with him or agreement of like a business. And because it was always him on the front end, essentially, when he cut me out, I was just left with, well, a nice experience. And that was it. And for a few years, it bothered me. And I think it taught me to shy away from doing that kind of work with people. And there were some trust levels
Mm,
that I was like, oh, like, I don't know how I could trust people. But I think that the deeper lesson that it was there to teach me was just understanding that beneath the interaction that we have, that one, I'm way too nice. I'm way too trusting. I'm way too much
right,
of a nice guy.
alright.
And that understanding that business is best when held in a secure container of understanding and contract. But also, I learned a lot from it. So I was really grateful for it. Though there's good and bad things from it. It was my first real business. It was my first real failure, and I
Mm.
learned some good lessons.
Dude,
Yeah.
that is so painful, man. I can't believe he cut you out like that. I'm sure you're probably working your butt off.
I mean, at the time, it was tough. I did feel like, it was my first real business. I poured my heart and soul into it. I put in every penny that I had. Um,
Mm,
and I'm sure, now looking back, because it's been, more than a decade, right? Now looking back, I have no ill will. I actually have a lot of love for that experience. Like I said, I learned a lot.
mhm.
Um, but at the time, yeah, it was tough. It was a tough lesson and an expensive lesson, but also in the long grand scheme of things, it was one out of many, many, many lessons that I would later on learn.
I mean, I'm sure you have no regret, right? I mean,
No, none
obviously you have,
whatsoever.
like right, meaning the regret being, like, you wish you knew about contracts earlier.
I
Um,
wish I had learned to hire a lawyer back then. Yeah.
uh,
If you're gonna
yeah.
start a business with somebody, hire a lawyer. It's there for your and their own good.
Right, right, right. Wow. Wow, man. Dude,
Hmm.
that must have been heartbreaking also, because 'cause I'm sure you looked up to this guy, right?
Yeah. I think that was probably one of the biggest things because, especially when you're at that age, you kind of assume that everyone else around you has your best interest in mind. You don't really think
Mm,
about it. And like I said, I think that we tend to, misattribute malice for self preservation. And I'm sure he
mm,
has his reasons. I'm not holding anything against him. But at the time, it was tough because it made me question um, the integrity of what I thought maybe he
mhm.
was, and
Right.
thinking at the time that I was like, oh, well, this seems out of that integrity, and it made me lose some faith in even the messages that was behind it. Because on the surface, he was so open and caring about others, but
Mhm,
again, it just really comes back to teach an important lesson that it's not always like how we experience something is not always how others will experience something. And at
mhm.
the end of the day, like, trust and verify, right? Trust and have contracts,
Right.
trust and work with lawyers. These are things that we learn to work through in our own life.
Yeah, man. Wow, I just that to me, that is a heartbreaking story to hear, and it's hard for me to even get past myself, just, like, vicariously. It's like you work for this person, and then they just kind of, like, steal everything you worked for once you create, like, a sustainable model, so it's just like, whatever. Um,
Yeah. And at the same time, what an opportunity that I had, what a lesson that I got to learn, and what a story now that I get to tell.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, were you able to why didn't you have the idea to, like, just find a new person and continue the business?
So yeah, that was actually what led me to start Mastery Academy. So after
Mhm.
the, I would say the dissolution of that, because it was tough. It's kind of like getting a breakup, like a business
Right.
breakup, but like there's no difference between a business breakup and a relational breakup. Really, if anything, it's, I think, compared to some of the breakups that I had, that was one of the worst ones. It happened over email. Literally just was like, hey, just want to let you know that we're done here. I emptied out the bank account, and yeah, all the best. And this was like 2 weeks after I was sending him messages, and I couldn't get a response back. But it was so I got depressed, and
Dude,
I
they just
dealt with it
emptied the
for a
bank
while.
account? I'm sorry,
Yeah, I
dude.
think he sent me like $1,000 or something like that.
Are you being serious,
And I
man?
was like,
How much was in there?
I don't even know. But really, I think that it was the emotional part that was the tough part. It wasn't the money,
That's harder, yeah.
because it was business, right? Like you kind of put everything back into the business. You put that into marketing, you put that into advertising. Neither of us were really focused on trying to pull profit at that stage.
Mm,
I think that really it was more so the personal experience that I had that was more impactful.
yeah.
Um, yeah, for a few months, I got, really mopey. I would just like stay in bed, and I got really depressed. Woe was me. I got, really down on myself. And I think once again, I looked at that and I went, okay, well, I could keep feeling bad about this, or I could take the lessons that I learned and apply it to what was really exciting for me. And like I said,
Did
I
that
think
actually
now, Mhm. Yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I just wanna ask you, like, what actually got you over it? Was it that mindset of just like, "Well, I could keep moping over the" because I feel like I know for myself for my own heartbreak, like, me thinking like, "I just wanna get over this." Like, it doesn't really help, you know? I'm curious, like, was there actually some type of experience or something that clicked? Maybe it was that. Or was it just time? Uh,
I mean, I wish that I was more enlightened back then and to just say that I just processed it and did some process work and move on. But I, so this was what got me over it. Um, I came across a quote on the
okay.
internet that said, "Your success is the best revenge."
Mm,
And that one quote drove me a lot. Was like,
wow.
I'm gonna go and work harder and do better and succeed, and then I'll show you. I think that was where
Mm,
that came from for me.
yeah. Did
Uh,
you get your revenge, man?
what's that?
Did you
I mean,
get your
I
revenge?
like to think so.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna name any or, name anyone or anything like that, but I will say looking at things, I definitely feel like where I am in my life, I no longer have that same sense of competitiveness and like I need to beat him. But I feel really blessed. I have
Mm,
I did eventually build a very successful business, and I did thrive quite a bit, and got to have lots of really cool experiences. And of course now we have more and more things down in the pipelines. So in that sense, yeah, I would say that I did become successful, and that there was a kind of quote unquote revenge there. But I it doesn't really matter to me, and it wouldn't have mattered for a very long time.
mm, mm,
Because you just move on from it. It's like any other heartbreak, like, it takes some time and then you get over it, and then
right.
you kinda go, "Okay, what's next? What do you move on to?"
Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful insight. John, I really want to hear more about your story though, and take me like internal. What is the
Sure.
origin story for John?
The
What is John's
origin story.
story? Yeah. Give me like the
The
Marvel
internal origin.
breakdown.
Whew, there's so many places to go. I think that for me, the core thing was always when I was growing up was belonging.
Mm,
And the reason I use that word is because what I thought I wanted, really, if we take a look at all the things that I worked through, was I always, I think we are always driven by one of 3 to 4 major things that we have. These are core values and core needs, and a lot of times what we experience when we're younger kind of go through that. Um, Let me think about how to best answer your question, because I think that your question of my origin story is about what is it that led to all these other things, right?
yeah.
Hmm. That's a really deep and beautiful question. Now, I wish that I could say that there was something really simplistic to sum it up. And I think that at the core of it is I just want to soak up as much of what life has to offer as possible,
Mm,
because very early on, I was so instilled with the belief that my value and my purpose and meaning on this was to get a good grades, get a good university, get a good job, make as money as possible, much money as possible, and then at some point get married, have kids, give my parents, grandkids.
mm,
Um, and because I was so trapped underneath all of that, because I was so focused around all of that, that I think when I really discovered that I had control over my own life in a way that was not just like, oh yeah, physically you have control, but that you can actually craft whatever you want. There's no rules around life. And that was something I really loved, was that one day I just realized like there's no rules. There's
mm,
no way you have to live your life. You could do whatever you want. Like if you want to go in the woods and be like a monk, you can. If you want to live your life by traveling around, following around a rock band, like you can. Like whatever you want to do, you can, as long as it's not hurting anyone else. And I wish that I could go back in time to tell myself at a younger age that your identity and who you are doesn't have to be about fulfilling other people's expectations. That would be the
mm.
main message. But growing up, like I said, my parents were both highly, high achievers. My mom was a famous journalist back in Taiwan. She had TV shows and radio shows.
Oh wow.
She had won an award for literally like there's an award in her house that is like top 10 most impressive women in Taiwan. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Oh
so you
wow.
grow up with that
Yeah.
that level of pressure because that expectation is like, wow, like if you achieve so much, then like, what am I gonna do to be able to live up to that? Right. I think our
Mm,
previous chat, like one of the things that you brought up was like I seeing how much sacrifice your parents go through and realizing, wow, I don't think that I could ever do what they did.
right.
And
Yeah.
for me, it was like, wow, she went through so much and she sacrificed so much. So I have to repay her.
Mm,
Right? I have to repay my parents for all the things that they created. So I was really hard on myself. I had a lot of pressure that I placed internally on myself, and I would shame myself and guilt myself for whenever it was that I wasn't able to hit a certain grade or a certain result or get, whatever it was, an award or whatever. And I was really hard on myself. My inner critic was very active. So it took a lot of time for me to really confront and face and really have that chat to allow myself to recognize what it was that was underneath it. My parents were very outspoken people. They had high standards and high expectations. And what my internalization of that was that if I wasn't able to match that, then I was somehow failing them. And that I was
mm.
failing not just myself, but I was failing my parents, my family, and even my extended family. And that took a lot of time for me to get through. Yeah. So a lot of the ways that I look at how I live my life now really I think is trying to make up for that.
Man, that's so real and so insightful.
Mm, thank you.
Yeah. How do you think you were able to get that level of insight of like recognizing the different pressures and the expectations that you were trying to fill?
So yeah, so around the time of 2016, this was after I had started building, my own business and, Mastery Academy was built. We were working at this point with I think almost 100 students at a time and our clients at a time within our business. We had group classes, we had all these things. The business was doing really well. We had scaled it
Mm,
to a 6 7 figure size. We were running all these different things, and it was ideal. From an outside perspective, probably one of the most successful I had ever appeared. And I was traveling
mm,
around the world, I was doing all these great things, but internally I was actually really burnt out and empty. And
mm,
I didn't understand what it was. I didn't understand because I couldn't talk to anybody about it. Because when you're successful, nobody believes that you have any problems. And then when you talk about your problems,
mm.
people kind of like look at you like, dude, like read the room. So you end up going, okay, well, if I have problems, I better hide it inside because that's shameful.
Mm,
And I was giving a talk at one point. I'm a public speaker, and I was invited to give an event at a talk. And I was looking at these people, and I was on stage, and essentially what we're talking about was high performance and how to be more productive.
mm,
And I was on stage and I was sharing these things, and suddenly I felt this pain in my stomach. And I didn't realize this, but I had basically given myself ulcers.
mm,
And all I knew at the time was, okay, I'm feeling this pain. And it's not like I was like, having something that I understood before. I just knew that it was such a sharp pain that if I didn't immediately sit down, that I would probably pass out. So I sat down and I gave the rest of this talk sitting. Um, and I went home and then I, went to see a doctor, talked about it. And the doctor basically said is like, when it comes to ulcers, everyone gets ulcers. It's not something that you can really see hereditary. It's just something that you get. But one of the biggest causes is stress and burnout. And I looked at my life and I realized I was doing all of these things that I thought I needed to do to be seen as successful. But I was so desperate within that I was so empty. I felt so drained. It felt like I didn't really have a purpose for anything anymore. And what followed from that day was essentially, I got sick. I got really sick. I went through a breakup. My business struggled. Everything in my life started falling apart. So I started therapy.
Mm,
And, actually I joined a men's group and then started therapy, which is why it is that, we really connected over that. Because I think that there are experiences that we don't get to talk about because of socialization, because of the expectations of our environment. And in doing that work, in actually confronting and talking about what I was really going through, the fears that I had, the loneliness, the isolation, the uncertainty, the fears and overwhelm that I was constantly holding internally, sometimes hiding even from myself,
mhm.
I suddenly started realizing there's so much more that I needed to take a look at that's underneath it. And that was where the real work, I like to think, really began. Like all the things that I did before then, that I was like, oh, this is what high performance habits look like. Like this is what communication look like. This is what success look like. I never realized what was underneath the surface, and the iceberg that was underneath that we talked about. What was really underneath it, and how much I was struggling. So that's when I started looking.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's so powerful. Like the ulcer experience, and that's kind of what woke you up to recognizing that like you're holding something in.
Oh yeah. I mean, I call it the cosmic 2x4s, that the universe will try to teach you lessons and will keep sending you messages until one day it'll just bonk you in the head with the 2x4 until you finally get your lesson. That was my cosmic 2x4.
Dude, yeah, what's that called, by the way? That comes up in life a lot. Like you will keep repeating the same thing until eventually you'll just get hit in the head with something. Something's gonna change.
I don't know if there's a proper term for that. I really believe in the concept. I've talked to so many people about it.
Yeah,
It is something that comes up again, again, again. I just think that we naturally repeat the patterns that we play out. And if
right.
we don't look at the patterns, we will keep making the same mistakes and keep making the same mistakes until either we learn it or we take it to our graves. And those are the only two ways that you can have that solution, right? That's the only two ways the story ends. And for some of us who are luckier, we get to hit by that cosmic 2x4 experience. For me, it was that burnout and that breakup and that total destruction of my life that allowed me
Right.
to then look at things and go, okay, something's not working here. Um, and I'm
I
glad
guess
that I went
something
through it.
came out of that.
Yeah, it was dark. I got really depressed. I was so anxious and depressed during that time. I was suicidal. I was lost. I just didn't know what was the purpose anymore. I felt like I had spent my entire life working towards something that I didn't want, and I
Hmm.
didn't know why. So now looking back, I'm really grateful I went through it.
That is amazing to be able to see something so dark and disturbing, like a breakup, having chased something that you didn't even want, right? And then to be able to even be grateful for that, like that really shows the level of growth. And I think, that's such a powerful message too for anybody going through such a dark time. And I could say the same for myself and through my own breakups and tough times of just like feeling like things just you don't want to go on or something anymore. And like feeling like everything has lost all of its meaning and
Mhm,
still being able to find happiness later on and
mm,
find meaning in the meaninglessness or meaning in the despair and pain, right? Like
mhm.
that's so powerful, and I feel like for anybody that is in that position of having lost hope, like to recognize, like, hey, 2 years later, like things could look totally different, and
Yeah,
and not only that,
absolutely.
like not only one more time.
Mm. I was just agreeing with you. Please continue.
Yeah, exactly, right, like, and I would say not only can things look different, like, you could even relook at this exact moment of pain and misery and and even feel gratitude for it in some way, like that's really mind-blowing.
Well, absolutely. There's you ever heard of the term controlled burning by forestry? In when firefighters. So I didn't
Mm,
realize this, but I love this as a concept.
mhm,
So if you take a look at, there's forest fires are usually dangerous and these terrible things. But there are times where firefighters and people who manage forests will essentially go and set the forest on fire deliberately, or parts of the
mm,
forest on fire deliberately. And the purpose for that is essentially allowing a fire to be burning to clear out dead vegetation in order to stimulate new growth in that area. So by burning it
Mm.
down, it actually improves it.
Mhm.
And at the time that I was going through this, that metaphor always stayed with me because now looking back, I realized that I had to go through that fire in order to
Mm.
burn away all the things that weren't working in my life. So now I'm a really big believer that if somebody is going through something, I remind them that, what you might be going through. I know it seems like the whole world around you is on fire right now. I know that things feel tough, but it might just be because it's burning away all the things that wasn't serving you from a past life so that there's now soil for you to plant who you're supposed to be.
That's so beautiful.
I really believe it.
Yeah.
I think that we have to go through some elements of allowing a part of us to die in order for the true selves, in order for our real selves to come into the real world, because otherwise we'll keep repeating the same patterns over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess you could call that karma. We were kinda, like, searching for a name, but
Mm,
mm.
yeah.
Though, I do wanna ask you, shifting gears, quite a bit, and I know we're gonna probably have to wrap up soon, but I wanna really shout out your book. I love your book. It's kinda like a
Thank you.
Bible a little bit. Yeah, and I'll tell you one of the things that I really love about it is it's kind of like a party mix. You have so many different types of it's almost like all the self-help books, like anything you could want, like relationships, confidence, like whatever it is you're trying to work on, it's really got it all, and it's like very culturally attuned and translates so well. Like, I love how you're able to, like, take a lot of these self-help concepts and be like, "Here is why as an Asian, like, this might not have been working for you," and, like, just really reshaping it, right? I I just love that so much. It's been very refreshing, entertaining, and extremely valuable. So, I wanna say thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you like it because, yeah, I wrote it with that intention. I wanted it to be complete. In other words, really, when I was writing the book, my thought was I wanted this to be the book that I had at when I was younger. Because when I was
Mhm.
younger, I couldn't find it. I really couldn't find. I kept looking. Like I said, I was a self development addict. I was looking at all the books, but I didn't feel like there was anything that understood me and my cultural background and what it's like being from that different environment. It's not necessarily about being Asian specifically, but from a different background. There is a difference when I'm coming
Right.
from a collectivist view. So yeah, the first third of the book is all about the inner work. It is about how do we feel more confident? How do we really like own our self-worth? If you ever feel imposter syndrome, if you ever feel like you're not good enough, how do we actually work around that? The second part of the book is all about communication and all about like how do we actually now use our newfound sense of self, because I think that the most important part is always starting from the inner and then going to the outer. Now how do you make sure that people don't talk over you? How do you get your ideas out in a way that other people will see and recognize your value? Even to this point of like how do you shut down somebody who is trying to to steal your power, or who is kind of like unconsciously maybe putting you down?
Mm.
How do you deal with somebody like difficult people? And then the third
Right.
part really is about how do you build a community around you? How do you work with your family? I think especially for us, Asian families is such a big deal. Like because we're from collectivist background, like family is such a big deal. Parents are very different in the way that we look at that family dynamic compared to Western cultures. For one thing, many of us, we still have a very close relationship with our families, and we might even live with them even after becoming adults, which is very different from a Western kind of context. So I really wanted to make sure that it had everything that somebody needed, no matter what stage they're at, no matter where they're coming from, no matter what it is they want. There's something in here that can hopefully unlock something for you.
It's brilliant, and I do love it, and I really wanna shout it out. I'm also curious though, like, what was the story behind it? Like, did a publisher come to you? Like, how did you end up writing Big Asian Energy? Like, how did this come to you?
Oh man, TikTok. Which is probably not like a common answer.
Yeah.
But no joke. Okay, so I discovered TikTok, and I started making videos on TikTok, and some of those videos started going viral. And it started to balloon, and I think that was where it was. So by the time that I was talking to a friend at the time that I always knew that I wanted to write a book. That it's always been a dream.
Mm.
And basically, they connected me to a literary agent who was like, let's work together in creating what that book will look like. And they shopped it around to different publishers. So, yeah, if it weren't for the fact that I had a TikTok video, I had TikTok videos, I don't think that I would have actually ended up writing that
Dude,
book.
that's amazing. That's such an
So,
amazing story.
so thanks, TikTok.
I'm getting TikTok. I gotta get on TikTok.
Oh,
Dude, that's so
man.
amazing though, and so serendipitous. You know,
Yeah.
it's pretty cool. So, how did the name Big Asian Energy? How'd you come up with that?
That actually, I had to thank the name Big Asian Energy. I had to thank a buddy of mine for. I was on a kind of a rafting trip. And at the time, it wasn't the book yet. It was just a podcast. And I was like, I was working on a
Mm,
podcast. I had this idea. I was talking about it. And a buddy of mine, his name is Peter. And Peter Shallard, actually, you can look him up. He has a business called Commit Action. He's a psychologist who helps entrepreneurs do more things. But he was part of that, group that we are all on that retreat on. And we're just chatting about it. And at the time, I think I was like, I want to write a book called there's a book, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called The Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother. It was written by this woman named Amy Chua, who was like a professor, like years, like more than like 20 years ago. And it was talking about tiger parenting. So if you ever heard of the term tiger
mm,
parenting, it's that like stereotype of the strict Asian parent, right? And she basically, wrote this book on how she like pressured her children to play the violin super late, threatened to burn their favorite toys, their teddy bears, banned them
mm.
from going to sleepovers, and basically were super harsh. Belittled them, called them nothing. Said they were trash. And she said that
Wow.
this is the way you raise children in order for them to become successful. And of
Mm,
course, this book was massive, and drew a lot of attention. And I, at this point, had been working with so many Asian kids who had grown up with that kind of parenting. And we already started seeing, like, yes, these people are driven. Kind of like at the time, like I was so driven, I was so focused on achievement, but they were also really feeling empty inside. And they were self diminishing constantly because they were believed so deeply that they're just not good enough, because that's how they were
mm,
taught. They grew up being taught that whatever they achieved wasn't good enough, that there's always someone better, and most importantly, that if you weren't good enough, if you didn't get enough A's, you didn't deserve love.
mm,
And that was the core messaging. And funny thing about that whole story was that I looked at that and I went, oh, how is that not normal? And because to me, I thought that was just what everybody felt all the time. I thought that was every parent. It didn't occur to me that other parents just gave their children love because they're kids and they deserve unconditional love. So at first, the title I wanted to write was called The Rebel Cry of the Tiger Child. And Peter, who was at the place, was just like, that is a terrible name. Do not call it that. And it doesn't make sense. And he's like, you know what it is? Big Asian energy. And I thought that was the most ridiculous thing. I'm like, wait a second, what? He's like, big Asian energy. And I'm like, that's actually brilliant. Damn it, Peter. So I
Dude, that is
so
that
I
is
ended up
genius,
taking that
man.
name. Oh, so
Yeah,
good. You know
that's
what's
so
so
good.
funny? So
Yeah.
yesterday, I got this, funny enough, from my mom. She sent it to me and she's like, I came across this article. I didn't know this, but that same author, Amy Chua, actually later on came out and wrote a second interview, and or sorry, gave an interview. And she said that she had gone through a really debilitating sickness for a while. And
Mm,
when she was going through it, she reflected on her life and she realized she was wrong. And
mm,
she talked about how much she regretted. She's like, if I had one regret in my life, it's the way that I treated my children when they were young. And she
mm,
said that I was way too harsh. And, I wish that I had gone back and did it differently, because sure, they became successful by the definition that she thinks, but what did I have to sacrifice and what did they have to sacrifice? And what if they never had to sacrifice it? Because the truth is, there are plenty of kids who grew up without ever having gone through that who becomes far more successful because their motivation wasn't coming from this belief that they weren't enough, but because they genuinely had a purpose and values and something that they really wanted to fight for. And she actually talked about that. And she's like, I regret it. All these years later, I had written a book. I became the face of being a tiger parent. And that was my greatest regret.
Wow. Wow. Man,
Yeah.
that's sending chills through me right now.
Powerful stuff,
Just
right?
like really powerful. Really powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Taking it back just a second though, that name that you thought of, the rebel cry of a tiger child. Could you imagine? I don't imagine that making the top charts.
That would
In
not.
episode.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Nobody would buy that. So thank you, Peter, for coming up with a much better idea.
Anyways, John,
Oh,
this is such a fun conversation, man. And really,
loved
if you
it.
come to Queens, I'd love to host you in person. I'm doing a big upgrade to my studio, so we'll definitely have a really nice conversation and a gorgeous
Part three.
looking cameras and
Part
stuff.
three.
Yeah,
Part three.
let's
We're gonna
definitely do
do
it.
it.
Awesome. Yeah, John. Honestly, I've been looking for a new closing question, but I've always asked as my closing question, and I want to brainstorm a good closing question with you if you'd like. But
Okay.
yeah, my closing question is always: if there was one thing that you would want everyone to know that you would just scream from the rooftops, what would that be?
Hmm. That's a really good question. It used to be you are enough. I think that
Mm,
that used to be the thing that I would say, but I feel like the truth is that we could be told that a billion times by a billion different people, but we won't ever believe it. And so now I think that what I would share is just the question of what is one small thing that you could be grateful that you've done for yourself lately?
mm,
Not just gratitude for other people, but gratitude for yourself. We don't really think of ourselves as being separate, obviously, because we are seeing ourselves as being one whole being. But the truth is that we have different parts. We have the part of us that is the observer, that listens and hears what it is that we are going through, and that judges and experiences things. And then we have the actions that we do, which is often unconscious. And I'm always really curious is, have you done something kind for yourself today? Have you done something kind for somebody else today? And is there something that you've done for yourself today that you can be grateful for? Because I think that the more of a practice that we get to build, where we feel that sense of gratitude for ourselves, that's really where the true confidence that we're going to build in our lives can come from.
that's so beautiful, man. And I love how
Yeah.
you want to share that message of like people understand that you. And I feel like interestingly enough that if you could feel gratitude for yourself, you could also recognize that you are enough in the sense of like every way that it matters, right? Like, because you are a human
Mhm.
being, right?
Yeah.
You are something that is almost like infinitely valuable and like to like come to center with that, right? And
Hmm.
recognize it. I feel like that's such a beautiful, um, it would be a beautiful thing if we could all kind of feel that way. And I feel like what's also funny is that it, I don't know why this is. This has been a little bit of a rant for me for a while, but like, um, society is kind of like structured in a way where it's very uncool to be happy, right? Like it's almost like considered arrogant to feel gratitude for yourself. Like don't
Yeah.
toot your own horn or something. What's up with that, man? What is up with that?
I I think that it's the result of I mean, I think that it starts there is a good thing behind being humble, but I
Mm,
think that we've taken it so far that it's become a kind of performative humility,
mm,
um, where we are so quick to judge, and I think social media plays a big role in this. Like we used to just have room for all the experiences that we do when back before social media, when instead of hanging out, with ourselves most of the time, and we're seeing this, right? Statistics are seeing that people are spending more and more and more and more time alone compared to previous
mm,
generations, even just 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Like the amount of time that we're spending alone with our computers,
mm,
with our phones have skyrocketed, and the amount of time we spend with other people have diminished. So everything in social media is a one-way street because we're not really sharing, we're not really
mm,
connecting with anyone. So the idea of recognizing ourselves is the only practice that we have, because in the past, other people would give us that recognition. We would feel a sense of purpose when we made small acts of kindness to other people. We converse, we share, we help one another out. There was a kind of community village culture. But now we lost that.
Mm,
So even the idea, I'm a really big believer in being grateful for other people, but when we can actually take a moment and be grateful for ourselves, which is sometimes really hard to do, we have to first acknowledge that we have value, that we create value. So
mm,
I think that that's something we need to kind of reprogram in. When I talk about big Asian energy, I'm not saying that Asian culture is better. As a matter of fact, I think collectivist cultures have a lot to learn from individualist cultures, and individualist cultures have a lot to learn from collectivist cultures. But I think
yeah.
that the core of it is in recognizing our own humanity and our own imperfect and, I would say, perfect imperfections.
Dude, we should do a whole podcast on this, on just like the individual and collective culture, like what
So
we can
many
really
things to
learn
talk
from each
about.
other. Yeah, right.
So many things.
100%. John, again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, everyone. Where can people find you, John?
You can find me at bigasianenergy.com. That's my website. Go on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. You can find the Big Asian Energy book. Um, and of course, if you're on social media like Instagram, you can check me out at John Wang Official. That's my handle. I'm also on TikTok, John Wang Bay, and all the social stuff. I'm sure I'll send some links your way so you can put it in the show notes.
Of course, yeah, guys, definitely check out the description. Send John some love. And as always, guys, stay curious. You're more capable than you think you are. Think for yourself and to the rebellion.